In a recent video, we looked at whether sifting the ingredients of a seed starting mix improves the quality of that mix. Now it's time to examine the results and discuss the next stage of the planting process. I've got a bunch of notes here, so let's jump right in. Sifting the ingredients seemed to help a little, but germination was still spotty. I think it might have been due to just differences in the types of seeds and their viability. Some may have been older than others, for example. This year I started collecting data on the germination rates I'm getting. That way I can sow an extra seed or two in each cell if the germination rate for a particular variety is very low, like it was this year with the cayenne peppers. Germination with the eggplants was also very low, as you can see in this tray. Almost all the spoon tomatoes on the right side germinated, but only 3 or 4 eggplants on the left side came up. Since the soil is the same, there must be some other limiting factor in their germination. Maybe temperature? I'm not sure yet. It's been hot and humid here, even in the winter. Then the ceiling fan in my room broke, so I had to use the fan I normally use for the seedlings in there until I could repair it. And since I didn't have a fan blowing on the seedlings, some of the cells developed a green mold on the surface of the soil, which I'm sure didn't help with germination. But this is a good opportunity to talk about that. If you live in a humid area, I think you should keep a fan blowing on the seedlings pretty much 24/7, especially if the top of the soil is damp. The moving air from the fan keeps the top of the soil dry, which helps prevent dampening off and some of the other problems that can occur when stuff starts growing on the surface of the soil. It also prepares the seedlings for the strong winds they'll encounter once they go outside. It doesn't have to be a powerful fan. I have this one on the lowest setting and it just rotates back and forth. Those wind strip cells are quite small, so I like to up-pot the seedlings out of them as soon as I can. It's a lot easier to make good potting soil now that we've got these pan sifters, so up-potting isn't as big of a problem as it was before. Now I've been doing the initial up-potting into these yogurt containers. They seem to be the perfect size because they're taller than they are wide, and that allows me to fit more of them under the grow lights. It also means I can fit more of them in these recycling bins, which is what I use when I start hardening the seedlings off. I try to pick a cloudy day to bring them out the first time. Now what I really like about these recycling bins is that the sides are high enough to block most of the wind, but a little breeze still tickles the plants. Like the fan inside, this encourages them to grow more sturdily. And having them in the recycling bins also makes it a lot easier to haul them in and out of the house during those colder nights. Eventually the seedlings outgrew those yogurt containers, so I up-potted them again into these larger ones. And that went fine, but as the plants got bigger, I started noticing that their newer leaves were much lighter green than the older leaves. The squash also had some sort of deterioration along the leaf edges, and I initially thought it might be a nitrogen deficiency since I hadn't fed them anything yet. So I fertilized them with a 5% solution of urine, but it didn't seem to help. Then I started thinking that perhaps it was a potassium deficiency, which is something that our soil is known to have. A lack of potassium can lead to chlorosis, or a yellowing of the older leaves. It can also cause necrosis, where the edges of the leaves look burned. This is basically what I was seeing on some of the squash leaves. So I gave him some of this potassium sulfate, which we talked about in the video linked in the description. But after observing them for a few days, the pale light green color of the leaves hadn't changed. I'd been setting the seedlings outside during the day because it was so warm and sunny. But toward the end of February, we got another Arctic blast that dropped the daytime temps back down into the upper 40s, and it was cloudy and rainy. This presented a problem because I had already hardened these seedlings off. They were too big to really put back under the grow lights, and plus I already had another round of seedlings growing under them anyway. So we ended up having to rotate them under the small grow light for about 6 to 8 hours a day. It was only for a couple days, but I was worried they'd get stunted by the lack of light, you know? Ultimately it worked out though, and as it warmed back up, I was able to start putting them back outside. You know, every year we learn at least one major thing about how to improve our project here in Magnolia Bend. Usually it comes from us failing miserably, then trying to understand why. The first year we learned the importance of using good soil. The second year we learned the importance of mulching the soil. Last year, we learned the importance of building strong trellises for our plants to support them in these gale force winds. And so far this year, we've learned that we need to get some more grow lights if we want to start our seeds this early. I do think it makes sense to start the seeds when we did this year, which was about the middle of January. But as we expand the garden, we inevitably have to start more and more seedlings indoors. And since we can get freezes as late as March, we need to be able to provide larger seedlings with enough light indoors to make it through those stretches of cold weather when we can't put them outside. Anyways, like I said, the weather warmed back up toward the end of February and I put the seedlings back outside. But the new growth on them was still extremely pale in color. I never noticed this on the seedlings I grew in previous years, but maybe I'm just paying more attention now. After doing some research, I learned that this symptom can also be caused by an iron deficiency. Now the thing about iron is that it has low mobility once it's inside the plant. That just means that it's hard for the plant to move it around to where it's needed. This contrasts with something like nitrogen, which the plant can relatively easily move from an older leaf to a newer leaf if necessary. That's why nitrogen deficiencies tend to show up in the older leaves first, because the plant is reassigning the nitrogen in those older leaves to the younger leaves. Iron is the opposite. The plant can't relocate it from the older leaves, so the symptoms show up in the younger leaves first. And that's exactly what I was noticing on our tomato seedlings. The older leaves looked fine, but the new leaves were really faded looking. In that tomato video last year, we talked about this STEM fertilizer, STEM, which stands for Soluble Trace Element Mix. It contains a lot of the micronutrients that our heavily weathered and leached soil lacks, like sulfur, copper, manganese, and iron. Since iron is so immobile within plants, I was thinking that a foliar spray directly on the seedlings might provide the new leaves with the iron that they're missing. So I mixed up a tiny amount of it in a spray bottle. Unfortunately, I didn't have a proper scale to weigh centigrams, so I had to guess a bit at the amount. But you really just need the tiniest amount of this stuff, way less than you think. So I applied that by spraying it directly onto the seedlings, then I waited a few days. I probably should have followed the label's instructions and tested it on a few plants first before doing them all at the same time, because a couple of the tomatoes got badly burned by the fertilizer. It's strange because most of them didn't get burned, but the ones that had the worst burns were right next to each other, so my guess is that I just sprayed too much of it on them relative to the others. 3 days after the foliar spray, however, the new growth on both the tomatoes and the squash was incredibly dark green compared to how it was before. It's a bit hard to tell on the video, but I think you can really see it on this squash seedling here. Notice how much darker the smaller new leaves are compared to the larger mature leaves. Before the foliar spray, they were both the same light green color that you see on the large leaf. Now, I didn't leave any seedlings unsprayed as a control, so this isn't scientific, but anecdotally speaking, my observation suggests that the chlorosis on the newer leaves was indeed due to a micronutrient deficiency, most likely iron. I've heard people say that sometimes when a plant is growing vigorously, it simply doesn't have time to slowly move enough iron into its new leaves. And since iron is a critical component of both chlorophyll and photosynthesis, that can cause the new growth to lack the healthy dark green color that we expect. Perhaps over time, the chlorosis I was noticing would have resolved itself without my intervention. But I'm glad I experimented with it a bit because I managed to rule out both nitrogen and potassium deficiency as the cause, and that knowledge is valuable. The couple of seedlings that experienced fertilizer burn from the foliar spray are recovering nicely as well. Before we leave the topic of fertilization, one other thing that I've been trying to do this year is write down what I fertilize and when so that I can keep better track of it. You know, a lot of places give out those free calendars at the beginning of the year, so I've just been jotting it down in one of those. But a calendar app would probably be better since you could store the data in the cloud and have a lot less chance of misplacing it. If you remember, I had mentioned in the video about compost sifting that I was going to build some leaf mold factories. Well, we went ahead and did that before it gets too hot. Now's a great time to do it too, because these southern live oaks are shedding their leaves. But we basically just put 4 6-foot T-posts in the ground to make a box with 4-foot sides. Then we wrapped some welded wire fencing around it. We put them under these pecan trees so that they'd be shaded during the hotter seasons, and also I can reach them with the hose in case I need to wet them down during the drier months. These are nice because if you leave one side loosely attached, you can open it up and add some leaves or remove leaf mold from the bottom later when it's done. I sort of inoculated them by taking some of these half-decayed leaves from the old pile where we tried to harvest some leaf mold in that sifting video. It has a lot of fungus in it, so I figured that might give the factories a head start. Then I've just been piling up leaves around the property and mulching them with the push mower. You know, I don't think mulching is entirely necessary with these, but the leaf mold will probably be done a lot faster if the oak leaves are partially broken down already. It also greatly reduces the volume of the leaves, so we can fit more into the factories and we don't have to make as many trips transporting them over here. We've got one of the containers filled up so far, and we're working on the next one now. If all goes according to plan, we should have some nice leaf mold to use next year in our seed starting mix and around our garden. So that's about where we're at here in early March. Our seedlings are enjoying the warmer weather, although we've still got some upcoming dips into the 40s at night. But the soil temperature is already reaching 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so we started transplanting some of the tomatoes out here into the ramp bed. I'll make another video later in the season to update you on how everything's going. I'm also working on a new video series that's all about soil. We're going to take a very deep dive into all aspects of soil because I think understanding that is the key to achieving the success in the garden that we're all looking for. I plan to cover everything from the types of soil and their physical properties to the complex chemistry that's taking place within soil and how it affects the plants we grow. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button so we can explore the fascinating world of soil science together. Thanks for watching, and until next time, good luck out there.